Hello, come back, come back to Technology Innovation Hub. It's going to be the 7th session on Oracle architectural explanation. Let me share the screen. Yeah, we were in the mid of this slide explaining the program global area. So let's continue that explanation. Yes, so we were doing this and we got the definitions for this stack space, hash area, bitmap, merge area. And I mentioned those are going to be permanently in the PGA, whether it's going to be dedicated or shared, the connection. It's going to be permanently on the PGA. And the variable component is user global area, because user global area, it depends on the connection type. When you have dedicated server, it's going to be reside on inside the PGA. Whereas when it comes to shared server, it can be either in shared pool or large pool inside the system global area or shared global area. So let's continue now inside user global area. So within the PGA, we are going to have another memory area called user global area. In fact, the user global area is the third memory structure that we have to discuss. I think we remember on the last session, I saw you the order of explanation. We learned the SGFS, then now we are learning the PGA together with user global area. So most of the components within the user global area also will be explained here. And this is the first one, SQL work areas, and we are going to have private SQL area, and you're going to have session memory, and here on the SQL work area, there will be sort area. For example, now when you type select whatever order by group by commands, so it causes sorting. So user select a command with order by and group by. So definitely there will be sorting in order to get the whatever the records in order. So then what's going to happen under SQL work area, this area will be utilized in PGA. Then we are going to have session memory, that is session variables, and this is for OLAP, online analytical processing. And of course, we can have the definitions, and in private SQL area, we're going to have the execution plans. And this is very important area, private SQL area. Because now we know PGA is dedicated. PGA is dedicated in a sense, unique per a user session. Now, actually, what's going to happen? Okay, let's say when a client, we are going to connect to the database from a client machine. So we know the client process, so the user process will take place on the client machine. Because you are going to type the command, okay, username and the password and the connect string from whatever remote tool, maybe SQL plus, maybe SQL developer, maybe whatever Visual Studio, whatever tool, we are going to type the username, and the last thing will be the host string. Host string means it will tell where to connect. So then, as soon as we initiate the connection on that client end, we are going to have something called a user process. So this user process using the host string, it will direct the connection to the server. Server means the database side. So actually, we are not going to discuss the total steps here, because here the purpose is to understand the PGA part of this particular connection request, and when it's connected to the database. So anyway, now there's something called listener. We detect the incoming process, and listener will initiate a server process, because client process unable to communicate directly to the server process. So therefore, listener will initiate a server process, which is on behalf of the client request. The server process is going to verify the username and password, and depending on the authentication privileges and all, it will either establish the session or it will not establish the session. So let's say session is established, so then comes the PGA, that is what. I mean, and that is in dedicated server, that simple process will take place, but in shared server environment, we are going to have dispatch as well, and there's a session, I mean, there's a queue as well. So anyway, once the session established, that means a server process is there on behalf of the client process. So server process initiated means we are going to have the program global area created. And after that, that server process, if it is a dedicated server process, it is always going to be one-to-one. That means one client process going to get the attention of one server process. 10 client processes means there will be 10 dedicated servers. And what's going to happen, whatever the commands is issued from the client end, first of all, it needs to be passed. Even if the select command happens, update command happens, these queries need to, first thing is to generate the execution plan. So when generating the execution plan, the server process will be heavily utilized in this pivot SQL area. So anyway, let me show you the definitions and some explanation from our technical document that you have been referring. I think you may remember this document. Let me take that one. Again, this one. Oh, hold on. This is the document. Yeah. So now this is the technical document that is I have used earlier. I have told you about this 19C architecture technical document. So in that they are explaining nicely those components. You can see the SQL work area and the sort area. I mentioned it is used for order by and group by, and then comes the session memory, right? And this what session memory and private SQL area. So these things are explained here. So for session memory, what they are telling, the user session data storage area is allocated for session variables and all. And then OLAP, online analytical processing, because if this option is enabled for analytical data, I mean, we know the decision making and those things for analytics, data analytics, and this area will be utilized in here, OLAP, if such application is running. And then we have this one as well, pivot SQL area. So this is what I was explaining, and they are giving a little bit of considerable explanation for the pivot SQL area, because that is very critical. And even if you are looking for these exams, now let's say we have 19C, 1 82, 83 exams, admin exams, they'll be asking, definitely they'll be asking these questions on the exam. So you better get a thorough knowledge on those things. Now, for example, the same thing that I explained. This area holds the information about a past SQL. So I told you about past. We'll be discussing these things in more detail in upcoming architecture sessions. But for the time being, I told you any SQL statement before execution, because normally SQL statements are going through mainly 3 steps. That is pass, fetch and execute. Pass, fetch and execute. So pass is the very first one. So passing means what? Statement has to be syntactically correct, and it has to be the object names has to be correct. For example, we say select employee number name from EMP. So there's a EMP object, it's a table object. So these objects should be available in the particular database. So like those things are checked, and the column names are checked, syntax are checked, the privileges are checked. So at the end of all of these check-ins, only the pass, the execution plan. So that is known as the end of pass. So outcome of the pass will be the execution plan. And execution plan will be stored in where? Initially, it will be there in this private SQL area, and later it will be pushed to the shared pool, and it will be in the library cache. We will come to that later more detail. But for the time being, what they are telling is it is inside the program global area as a unique area for that user, non-shared area. So that's what they are telling here. You can see when server process statement and other than session specific information for processing. What they're in private SQL area, the area holds the information about past SQL statements other than session specific information for processing. When server process execute SQL or PLSQL, the process uses the private SQL area to store binary variables, and that's another purpose, binary variables. Query execution state, what is the current state of the execution, and the query execution work areas, and the query execution work area. That's true. Multiple private SQL areas in the same or different sessions can point to a single execution plan in SGA. So that is a very important statement. Multiple private SQL areas in the same or different session can point to a single, it's like now to explain this one. So this is, we are talking about only one PGA per user session. So there can be multiple PGAs. for multiple sessions as well as now as to what they are telling. You can see multiple private SQL areas in same or different session. In the same session also you can have private SQL area, because each SQL statement, it has to be a private one. And ultimately what they are telling, this can be point to a plan in the SGA. So that's what I mentioned. Initially these plans are in the private SQL area, but later it will be pushed to where? It will be pushed to this shared pool, this area, in the shared pool library cache. So later, I mean, whenever it comes to the library cache, those things are shared. No? So any session can access those things. So that's why they are telling here, multiple sessions can access the same plan. So that's why when it's moved to the shared pool, it can be accessed. But as far as those things are here, it is unique for that particular user. Because this is not a shared area. Program global area is not a shared area. Okay, so that's what they are telling. The runtime area contain query execution state. The persistent area contain variable values. The runtime contains the query execution information. A cursor is a name. A cursor is a name or handle to a specific area in the private SQL area. You can think of a cursor as a pointer in the client side and as a state. So let's discuss that one in the next slide. So I have an explanation for that. So that is very important, the private SQL area. So now we got awareness of all of the components within the user global area. So the very important thing is in a dedicated environment, user global area resides in PGA. Let's continue next one. Now comes the shared server. So this is dedicated server, shared server. Now shared server, as I mentioned earlier, several user process is going to share a one shared server process. Dedicated means always one client process or one user process will get the attention of a one server process. But the shared means many client processes or user processes going to share a single shared server process. That is the difference. As far as the connection are concerned, that's a difference. But inside the PG also there's a difference. So it's like this. When it comes to shared server, the user global area is not going to be within the program global area. That's the thing. The user global area is going to get moved to the large pool. Actually, initially it won't be in the large pool. Initially, it will be in the shared pool. In the shared pool, if the shared pool is running out of space, and if the large pool parameter is configured, then only it will move to the large pool. So there are conditions like that. These are tuning concerns as well, because let's say if you haven't tuned up the shared server environment properly, and if the shared pool in the SGA is not having sufficient memory, and if the large pool is not configured, there can be a congestion in connections, and the whole thing can get, I mean, the performance will go down and the slowness will come up, and there will be errors in the alert file. So there are many tuning concerns here on these configurations. And yeah, so this is in shared server environment, as I mentioned earlier, these three components, that is stack space, hash area, and the bitmap area. So those things are not going to change. Those things are definitely going to reside in the program global area. So it's not going to change. The variable component is this user global area. It's going to be either in shared pool or in the large pool. Okay, hope it's clear. So that is a dedicated server and shared server. All right, let's continue. Continue the next session. Now we are coming to another explanation. I think this is theory, what we have learned. Okay, let's go through it. A PGA is a non-shared memory region, understood, that contains data and control information exclusively for the use of Oracle process, which gets created when an Oracle process starts. Oracle process, that means Oracle server process actually. Or a background process also allocate its own PGAs. So PGAs are mainly created by server processes and background processes. That's what it's going to say. So background process mean DB writer, log writer, those also going to have its own PGAs. So PGAs are very critical thing. So second point, one PGA exists for each server process. So that's what the process means the server process and the background process. So that's a server process, background process, both going to have one PGA for each process. The collection of individual PGAs, the total instance PGA. So all PGAs together is going to have the instance PGA or the total PGA. The database initial parameters set the size of instance PGA, not the individual. So we can have the parameters. Now we know under automatic memory management, memory max size will automate the PGA as well. But under automatic shared memory management, ASMM, PGA will not be automated. Then you have to have the PGA aggregate target parameter. So whatever said and done, we can define the entire PGA size only, not these individual PGAs which is allocated session-wise. Session means the server process-wise or the background process-wise. So we can give a total PGA only. So that's what it is mentioned here. Yeah, global area. The next point is the PGA is memory specific to an operating process or thread that is not shared by other processes or threads on the system. Memory specific. That's true. It's a unique one. Because the PGA is process specific, it is never allocated in the SGA. So PGA is not within the SGA, but it is in the instance within the instance. The PGA is memory heap that contains session dependent variables required by a dedicated or shared server process, which is allocated by server process. This is understood. Session dependent is a unique per session. And this is another very important statement, the last one. The UGA must be available to a database session for the lifetime of a session. User global area must be available for the lifetime of a session. Understood, right? Whether it's dedicated or shared, the UGA is going to be there. It should be there right to the session. As far as the session is communicating with the server, that means the server process is up and running. You should have the UGA because it consists of a lot of information, session dependent information. For this reason, the UGA cannot be stored in the PGA when using a shared server connection, because the PGA is specific to a single process. So that's why. Shared server means what? We are going to share the processes. So, but PGA is specific to a single process. So it can't share like that. Shared server is going to share a single server process across many client processes. But PGA is a dedicated and it's not shared. So therefore, in a shared server environment, that's what they are telling. UGA cannot be stored in the PGA. So that's the reason why PGA is moved out. PGA is moved out because PGA is something created session-wise. Session means process-wise, user process, the server process-wise. So when the server process is shared using a shared server process, then what's going to happen? Then you can't have the UGA within the PGA because PGA is unique. So then it will be moved out. So that's what in the previous slide that was explained. So we understood that one. When it is shared, PGA is moved out to large pool or shared pool. That is the same thing is explained here in theoretically. So therefore, the UGA is stored in the SGA when the shared server connection. That is, SGA means in SGA either in shared pool or large pool, enabling any shared server process to access it. That's right. So when it's moved to the SGA, it is shared. So therefore, any shared server process can access it. Understood? Because it's shared. When using a dedicated connection, the UGA is stored in PGA. Very clear, we understood. But here, very important to understand these paragraphs. Even in production environment, when you work in, it's very when you have this base. I mean, when you know these steps very clearly, it's very easy to trace the issues, backtrace the issues, troubleshooting, and clearing those things. Because you know what's happening behind. Otherwise, when you're blind on the architecture and the back end, you are doing guesswork. So guesswork is not acceptable in a production environment. So you have to do the expertise work, no guesswork. Guesswork means it will create always messes. Right? So that is what we should avoid. We should have awareness and knowledge, proper understanding of what's happening behind. So that is the whole purpose of this architectural journey. Linking all the smallest components together and see how these are interacting together to get the total understanding, to get the whole picture, holistic picture or the helicopter view, and to understand that And we are going to, having the helicopter, we are going to narrow down the things and get into the architectural deep down, deep understanding, deep diving into the architecture. Okay, so then coming up next is basic memory structures. Still the memory structures are continuing. Now we are on PG and UGA. So private SQL area and shared SQL area. That is another thing. Now we know what is a private SQL area. Understood here? No? This we saw private SQL area. It is there. This is in PGA. Private SQL area is PGA. Either, I mean, PGA means within UGA, user global area. So UGA is within PGA, but it's shared. UGA is taken out. Anyway, it's better to say private SQL area is within user global area. Now, in this one, we're going to see another component called shared SQL area. This is no big deal when content of the private SQL area is available on the shared pool. That is known as shared SQL area. This was mentioned earlier because we cannot keep continuously things. I mean, when the things are in the private SQL area, it is accessible only for that session because it's a unique area for a within the PGA. So when it is available in the shared SQL area, that is those things are accessible by everybody, because we know the main component within the private SQL area, the execution plans. So execution plans, either it is created by a single user or many users, it should be available for all sessions. Either it is created from session 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say the plan is created from session 1, but session 3 also should be able to access it. Session 4 also should be able to access it. Otherwise, what will happen? Otherwise, even if session 2 again requests the same statement executed by session 1, Oracle has to repass. Repass means what? It's going to be hard pass. That means again it has to do the creating the execution plan from the beginning, which is taking time. It can be a performance hit because it's considered as a cache miss. Cache miss means always hard pass. That means not finding the execution plan in the memory. So it has to repass it. Repass is hard pass. Hard pass means you don't have the execution plan, so you have to repass it. Hard pass will always slow down it. I mean, performance is not good. We had to do a lot of IO operations and look at the data dictionary and get the information, and you have to repass. So we need to stop those things. So one of the best things to stop repass is sharing the execution plans. So when you move to the shared pool like this within the library cache, it is shared across all users. So that is what shared SQL area is. And when the hard pass is not happening, it is known as short pass. Short pass means it is reutilizing the existing execution plan. That is cache hit. Cache miss means it's going to go hard pass. So we should avoid cache misses. We should try to keep 99% of cache hit. So let's talk about those things later. So this is a private SQL area for shared. That is understood because in shared server, private SQL area is stored in shared pool. That is what I mentioned earlier. Before moving this one to a large pool, before moving the private SQL area, which is a part of the UGA, to the large pool, it is initially stored in the shared pool. So when it no sufficient space, and if this is defined, then only it's moved to here. But no sufficient space. If this is not defined, then we are in trouble. The slowness will start. So this comes to tuning. And we have additional areas in the shared pool, data dictionary cache, other than library cache, data dictionary cache, results cache, others. There are other components. Don't worry, we'll be doing the deep diving of each of these memory areas during upcoming sessions on the architecture. So this is just high level understanding. And the main purpose of here is to explain the PGA behavior. Okay, let's do a small walkthrough step by step. Let's say there's a client process. Client process wants to connect to the server. So what will happen? Initially, client process will username and password, then like I explained earlier, host string, and the server process. Once everything is checked up, if the user validation is okay, listener process will initiate the server process and everything, and it do the validation. Then if the user is authenticated to be connected, then what's going to happen? The server process will start. The server process start means what? A PGA will be created on behalf of the server process. We understood earlier. Whatever server process or background process will initiate the PGA. So that's what PGA is created. PGA is created means you are going to have UGA component, that is SQL work area, private SQL work area, and those things. If it is a dedicated, all the UGA components going to be within the PGA. And then what's going to happen? Once the PG is established, then this is very important, because SQL statements are happening initially on the client side, in the client process. So whatever the statement has to be coordinated and has to be generated. What has to be generated? The execution plan has to be generated. So that's the very first thing. Before doing anything, the execution plan has to come. So initially the client side compiler engine and the PGA side private SQL area has to communicate. And finally, now for example, this is select star from employees. Before running this statement, the execution plan has to be generated. So this command is initiated from the client server process, sorry, the client process, whatever the tool that you are using in the client process. Let's say you are using SQL developer. So initially that there's a SQL engine, compile engine, which has to check the syntax. So there's a communication happening between the PGA private SQL and the data area. That's why the pointer is there. So pointer is acting as the communication point between this private SQL and the data area. And then finally execution plans will get stored here. Then what's going to happen? These plans, execution plans, should be shared to the select star from employees. That's what it is. Means select star from employees. You can see it come in here. Select star from employees. Those execution plans are shared to the library cache. So whatever the execution plans available will be shared to here, so that other users also can access the same execution plan, because this is shared. As far as it is in the PGA, it is unique for this particular server process, but when it's moved to here, it is shared across all the other sessions. Okay, then let's say this is another one. Now this client process, the second client process, also will have another statement. Maybe it's the same statement. Now this one, when it's running this is another user, no, another client. But now for this statement, if the execution plan is available here, no need to worry about repassing this one. It can be reused here because it's already there. So it's a cache hit for the second statement. It has to be available in the shared pool. So that's why whenever a statement comes in, Oracle server process checks whether the execution plan is available in the library cache. If not available, this process will start to recompile and regenerate the execution plan, which is a hard pass. Right. So that is what now even this one, this process going communicating with this. That's what. So shared for library cache. And finally, everything is in the database instance. That is clear. So you can see even the PGA, STA both are in the database instance, but PGA is not going to be within the shared pool. That not the shared pool, not going to be within the shared global area. PGA is not going to be within the STA. It is outside the STA, but within the instance. Very important. Yes. Finally, dedicated server architecture, in which two sessions keep copies in the same SQL statement in their own PGAs. Yeah, that is another different thing explained in this picture. Now, if it is dedicated, that's what they are telling in this statement. If it is dedicated, these two copies it can maintain, because it's dedicated. No, PGA, each PGA will maintain the execution plans. Here it will be there, no problem. But in a shared server environment, in a shared server, the copy is in the UGA, which is in the large pool or in the shared pool when no large pool exists. That's why in a shared environment, you cannot maintain this one because UGA component is not in the PGA. No. In a shared server, UGA is always either in the shared pool or in the user global area. So that's what they are telling a different explanation, not a different explanation, it's another viewpoint for this particular picture. So that's why the private SQL area is listed here. So private SQL area is going to be always in the SGA when it's come to shared pool. But that doesn't say it is always shareable. Still it is unique for the particular particular user process, but it is located in the shared pool or in the large pool. In shared server, the copy is in the UGA. That's why UGA means within the shared pool or in the large pool. That's what the second part says, which is in the large pool or shared pool when no large pool is exists. If this is not configured, it is definitely going to be in the shared pool. Yes, sir. The behavior is same, private SQL area. This has to come to the library cache, and then only it is accessible for the rest of the users. Okay, so I think it is clear. Yeah, so then we have the software code areas that let's have it in the next session. Okay, let me end it here, and I meet you soon in the next session. Okay, have a great time. Bye bye.